the root loss calculator. Can I give them a bit more information? I'm going to try and be really bold. This laptop has not worked with high speed, but I'm going to see whether I can get it to work on the laptop, because I can't get it to work on my desk. There we have it. Oh, we've got it. Okay, there's the infinity screen. We're past that. We'll go to my desktop, and does anyone see ACT presentation? No. Right. Windows does what it wants to do when it wants to do. Extract to open. I'll just open it. Hopefully it'll open. Oh, yes, it will. Okay, so there's a fair bit to the root loss calculator, but I thought I'd just show you a section from a presentation. And I apologise to those that are in Canberra that are having a look at this and have just been through this process. But it'll help at least put it together in some context. So what the root loss calculator is, it's a way of looking at one part and other parts of the tree together. So in the case of the calculator, the diameter of the trunk versus the amount of material it's got, or biomass. And so it does that. And this process of looking at one part and another is called allometry. And it's a common thing in science, particularly biological sciences. So here we have the body mass index for a human being. That red line is my red line, unfortunately. When I was at my absolute peak, I was at 95 kilograms and 5% body fat, and I was still considered obese. So it's not about precise. Unfortunately, a little broader in the shoulder than some, a little heavier in bone than some. And so it just never worked precisely. So it's not about precision. It's about trying to get things closer to the mark. If we can keep that in line, and I've had people come back to me and say, look, I've got more than 50% of the tree biomass below ground. And the answer is, yep, that's going to happen on occasions. So it will be with the opposite. So with that in mind, some of you know this fellow. This fellow here is Adam Tom. And Adam Tom picked up a virus when he was in the Philippines a number of years ago. And he needed one of these things here called a heart. And so what he really needed was a mobile organ donor. Okay. And one came along, motorcyclist, donated his heart after he rode himself off on the bike, killed himself. And so Adam has his heart. And what made it difficult for Adam, Jeremy, can you recall how tall he is? 6'7"? Your mic's off.
6'8", I think.
6'8". So he needed a heart from a person between 6'7" and 6'9" tall. An inch either way. Any smaller than 6'7", the heart just wouldn't be adequate to keep his blood flowing at the rate that he'd need. And if it was any bigger, it would cause damage. So this is this process of allometry in application to human beings. So we can use the same process in trees. I'm not going to go through all of this component of it. But we want to know, and this is worthwhile looking at, we wanted to know how we could work that or apply that to the tree. And allometry is used in forestry all over the place. You can figure out bark thickness, crown shape, tree height, a whole pile of things from other components. One of the things I want to talk about is ground penetrating radar. And I just want to make sure that when you see late night TV and they're going around with CSI or whatever else, and they're looking for a human body buried under the ground, and you sort of get this concept that you're going to see something like this. That is not what you see, okay? It really is nice make-believe, but what you see is this, blips. And from those blips, you've got to figure out what's there. What they show is the soil's been disturbed. There'll be a change in the density around here. And so they'll know there's a burial spot. They'll know there's something there, but they won't know whether that's, the bones of a dog or what it is. My recommendations, if you have to bury someone, put a cow on top of them. It'll make it a little harder to find the human body. Suggesting, don't go and do that. There's problems with ground penetrating radar. As a result, you have to interpret and you can't see. So there's some advantages in other methods. Water, air. Air's got its limits. Air's better than water. Hand digging, and the new Australian standard 4970-2025 now has included hand digging as a way of finding roots. And you probably can't see it, but there's a small little root in the foreground here. I don't know whether you see my mouse there. Yes, you can. Another one back here, just hand dug. So quick and easy to do. If you're only doing something shallow. Of course, if you're trying to dig in sand, you could have all nightmares trying to get down to 3 meters because you've got to bench it out. So there are issues with any form of trying to locate roots. So one of the things that we said is there's problems when I look at I'll just move this out of the way for you. The problems when we look at tree protection and root severance. One of the things is we see things like this. This is Manly. This is after I did my very first workshop I attended. Not I ran. I attended a workshop in tree protection in 1988. And I went out with the presenter, found these trees at Manly with the sheep piling right up beside them. And we knew, of course, that was going to kill them. And it will one day. Or at least something will kill them one day, but as to this date, they're still alive. So if things aren't working right, then we've got to figure out there's got to be something we're not doing right that we need to know and understand. So that's what that picture is a reminder for me. And the thing that I gave consideration to is we can have a tree with a cavity, 1/3 opening, provided there's sufficient wall thickness. That tree is not significantly compromised. Would we agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So if that's not significantly compromised, then that's what's going to happen here eventually. Our tree is going to get some decay or it's going to occlude over, and regardless, that root that's coming out of here will not be there any longer, even though there may be a complete at ground level. So loss of 1/3 of the tree is not a lot. We looked at how much of the tree was below ground. And I will give you a QR code you can go to. You can download the paper that goes with this and the calculator. But we're able to sit down and put some stuff through an Excel spreadsheet. And that's essentially what this process does. Gives you a spreadsheet you can go through. And if this works right, and it may, no, I'll do that separately. It gives you a calculator. Let me go to it and then I'll do the calculator. Just go to the end so you've got it.
Quick question, Mark, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Andre here. When you looked at those two scars side by side, and the old one and the newer one, to what extent, when you go to the tables, you then go back to the big one and the big cavity and you say, well, that cavity is not since yesterday. That tree has handled the conditions and the storms 365 days a year, 15 years or longer. Do you bring that into your decision process?
The answer is I did, and no, I don't. I did when I first looked at this, and I don't now, because let's consider what would happen if that was a wound caused by fire and it burned through into a cavity that was already internally present and went up like a pipe. Like that image I saw a few minutes ago. Let me go back to it. I don't know whether I do it quickly, but I'll try. Yep, so there we are. This could easily have been a wound that was solid like this, with a pipe in the middle, fire starts, burns. This catches a light, burns through. That's very, very sudden, Andre. But the one that really crunched it for me was looking at tunnel trees in the US. And tunnel trees, I'm talking about the trees that people drive through. And if you
Yes.
look at tunnel trees, you'll see that they're largely hand hewn, they're cut. And that's more than 1/3 in one go all the way through. Now, I accept that big trees with large diameters have more static mass, less dynamic mass. But as far as the trees that we're concerned, we're not usually talking about having an impact on old trees with hollows where things have changed suddenly. Young trees are more tolerant, more flexible, so I generally wouldn't be so concerned. If I was concerned, I'd put a tree motion sensor on and then do some compensatory reduction load if I needed to. But I'm less concerned now than what I was, say, 5 years ago, which is when this process of this concept started.
Thank you.
So some limits of the calculator. It's not designed to give an actual mass. The real mass will vary from each tree species based on its bulk density and each tree as well, depending on how fast or how slow it's growing. However, the system proportionally under or overestimates both the stem and the root mass. So the ratio between below and above parts should be somewhere around correct. The process is about reducing uncertainty. So it's not about giving some precision, but saying, look, we know it's not at one end or the other end. We're somewhere around exactly the same as the biomass calculator. Just because it doesn't work in 100% of the situations doesn't mean we don't use the BMI index. We certainly use it all the time. I think that's something to keep in mind. And roots contain less lignin and therefore lower density than the above ground parts. This means that the root loss is likely to be even less than calculated. And as a result, we accept the calculator is knowingly conservative, and I think that's the way it should be. You can get a copy of it from there. I'll leave that up for a minute or so. For those of you who want to get their phones out and take a photograph of it. If you've got your mic suppressed, you might want to turn it on if you want to tell me not to. Otherwise, I'll move on in a second. Okay, so getting out of that and looking at the calculator itself, and it's just so much fun to play with an allometric calculator of any description. You just learn so much about trees. For example, you learn that a little bit of growth on a big tree makes a lot more difference than a small amount of growth on a large tree. So first thing is stem diameter. I've got 100 here. Let's go put in 60. For a 60 centimeter diameter tree, we're looking at 2.6 tons of stem mass, 703 kilograms of root mass. And we're saying if we lost 234 kilograms of root mass, it shouldn't affect the tree in terms of anything significant. And by the way, Andre, Hamilton suggests up to 50% of the root system, and Smiley did it to the extreme. He took 50% at trunk diameter. So he literally went off the trunk and cut the roots all the way for 50% of the root system. A number of those trees did fall, and I think that's probably as extreme as we'd want to do. If you wanted to find a nice experiment, look at this, find yourself 10 to 50 trees, cut 1/3 all the way up to the trunk. For all I care, put your stump grinder into the trunk and make the slice in, and test the stability before and afterwards with a static system or a dynamic system, and you'd have a fairly good set of data to go with it. But you can see here that if we take that, our 10 centimeter diameter root is 4.6% of the biomass. So it's not particularly great. If I went down, and we'll just change for the sake of it, this one to a 1 centimeter, it's almost no weight at all. It's 1/10 of a kilogram. And so we often have councils that'll say, for example, don't cut roots greater than 2 centimeters in diameter. Well, 2 centimeter diameters, interestingly, it's not got 4 times, which you'd expect because of the normal difference in diameter. So there's 2 centimeters root has 4 times the surface area, but it's also longer. So it takes that into consideration in the equation. So it's 0.62 kilograms. And 0.62 kilograms is about 1%. It's an almost nothingness of the process. In fact, we can find out exactly by putting it up as the first row, and it'll tell you there exactly what it is. There are 0.1% of the root system. I apologize. So, when I see conditions of consent that say don't cut any root greater than 2 centimeters, I'm figuring that they're just having a punt at something without any basis. At 5 centimeters, and this is on a 60 centimeter diameter tree, at 5 centimeters, it's going to be almost 1%. So how many roots could I lose? I could lose roughly 30 or 40 of those at 5 centimeters each and not have a significant impact on stability. So hopefully that makes some sense to you all. Let me just bring it back up. Does that make any sense for anyone at all?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So the
I
calculator
hear
just
you,
gives a
Mark.
way-
I hear you. Yep.
Yeah, it just gives us a way of looking at it and saying, are we close or are we not close? Now that you've got a calculator like that, you can play other games with it. And this is where I'm saying, okay, if I've got let's say I've got a 20 centimeter diameter tree, it's got a biomass of 1.77, 177 kilograms. If it puts on 2 centimeters of new growth, let's do that, 2 centimeters. Wow, it's got an extra 50 kilograms of mass. Okay, let's go to now a 60 centimeter diameter tree. And as a percentage, that's about 25% of its mass increase. That's a really massive growth rate, something like a grandis. Let's make it an older grandis. Let's make it a grandis with 100 mils diameter, 100 centimeters diameter. Okay, it's going to be 9.25 tons. Let's just see what happens if we only add 1 centimeter of increased thickness. It's added 300 kilograms extra of mass. So even at 1 centimeter increase in thickness, it's had far greater increase in mass. Does that make sense? Let's put it down to even 1 millimeter. See what we get. 0.1. It'll probably hate me. So it's gone from 9,318. Let's now go back on that. 9,318. Someone might remember that for me. Wow. It's 20 something rather. It's almost the same amount with 1 millimeter as opposed to 2 centimeters of increase. And that's just because we're putting that 1 millimeter over the entire area of the tree. In fact, I can work out from that very quickly in my head that this here, if we went to 1.02, 2 millimeters rather than 2 centimeters, a tenth of the amount of growth, we'd get more biomass stored by a long way just by adding 2 millimeters rather than 2 centimeters on a smaller tree. Does that make sense to you? And this has been one of the arguments in the forestry industry and in the climate industry is it's more important that we preserve old forests than we plant new trees. And they're absolutely right. I saw a lecture on it the other day, and of course, Mark sits in his bedroom watching a movie or watching YouTube and screaming and yelling and saying, no, heresy, you need to be hung, get out of the profession. Because the presenter said, look, we need to be preserving old trees, not planting new trees. And that is entirely false. It's false because it doesn't consider we need to be preserving old trees and planting new trees. It's not one or the other.
Mhm.
It is both. And so much in the climate movement have gone on towards one part of that because it takes time for a young tree to contribute positively to biomass, particularly if you're talking about northern hemisphere slower growing species. For us, of course, and for those in the tropical areas, land that's been cleared can be regenerated fairly quickly. And all you've got to do is look at the growth rate of spotted gum, for example, on the east coast of New South Wales. Jeremy, what would a 60 centimetre spotted gum be in Brisbane age wise?
Probably on good soil, 50 years.
Yeah,
60
so
years.
it's fairly good solid growth rates compared with if we go out and plant most maples or even poplar. It's the amount of biomass that's put down into faster growing species, just phenomenal. So look, you can have all sorts of fun with the biomass calculator. It's there for your use. The other thing that's there that I hadn't talked about with the people in Canberra, but you might want to have a look at it. And that's a root loss threshold calculator. This is for those in a city that want to know, for example, what sort of diameter. We've got a 60 centimetre diameter tree, and we don't want to take out any more than 2% in one go. Well, don't cut roots more than 7.1 centimetres in diameter or 71 mils in diameter. And so you can set a threshold for the size of the roots based on the diameter of the tree you're looking at, rather than coming up with a ad hoc answer. So there's a little extra add-in for you to play with. Any questions on that?
Just one thing, Mark.
Yeah.
The council's saying that don't cut anything, or our standard one is don't cut anything bigger than 50 mil, which is fine. I understand that they don't want to cut roots where possible, but they don't put a total on it. You can cut 300 45 mil roots, but you can't cut one 55 mil root. There's no quantification in it.
Yeah, that's why coming up with biomass is a really valuable set of guidelines.
Yeah.
And you'll very quickly realize that you're not going to record a 1 centimetre diameter on a 100 centimetre diameter tree, but you might look at it if you're talking about a 30 centimetre diameter tree. Now we've made the tree a lot smaller, and it's still not insignificant, but it's still it's 0.1% again, so it's still not great amount. And here, 5 centimetre, 5 centimetre, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 2, 3, 3. It's a fair few roots been cut there, and we're still only 18%. So it's really not that big a portion. Now, given that what we've lost is two things. We've lost roots that provide stability, but if it's confined to a tangent, or if it's confined to a sector, a triangular bit going in like that to the trunk, there's really... Have I lost? No. Yeah, it's really not that significant. It's more significant, I guess, if you went all the way around a tree. And, that's been looked at as well. I know that Andrew Benson has looked at some of that process of cutting all the way around it and how that affects ceilometry. But you can see, if you're at why from a transplanting point of view it works, if you're cutting roots that are largely 5 centimetres in diameter on a let's say a fig like the one in Hyde Park, say 1200 ril, it's bigger than that, but most of that's buttressing. A 5 centimetre root is 0.2%. It's just a nothingness. You could cut 50 of those, Jeremy, and you'd have 10%.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems, again, with this not having things. So, if a city wanted to say, look, don't cut roots greater than 5 centimetres on this tree, and, don't cut any more than 10% of the biomass without putting a load meter on it or a tree motion sensor on it, I would say, yeah, that's a reasonable, practical, scientific-based, what we call falsifiable. You can show that it didn't happen. You can show that it wasn't right, and it's verifiable. You've got this chain of evidence, chain of information. So it's not perfect. I suspect in time the calculations will become even more tailored and narrowed. But I don't see any problems with it being broad, because at this stage, what I see generally is concerns about just cutting a route. And I think I can say without this was in part developed by a Qantas pilot who was doing a development. He said to me, Mark, how do I demonstrate this truth to the city? And I said, well, we could work on an elementary equation out, and we talked about what and how. And he said, well, then I'm paying you, go and do it. And I think our biggest route was about 12, let's say 15 centimeters. And you can see 7.2% of the tree in one root. That root has been cut. It was only about 300 from the base of the tree. That tree is continuing to perform well. It did stress a little bit in a couple of spots. It's been mulched and irrigated, and now it's back to growing well and happily. So that's the end result we want. Ideally, good development retains trees as healthy long-term specimens in the landscape. Bad development restricts yield and causes urban sprawl, or causes trees to be removed on the site without being retained. So if I had a choice between retaining a tree and pushing the limits, or removing the tree, I'll take retaining the tree, pushing the limits, and crossing my fingers that I've got it right. I'm not usually worried about stability. My usual worry is, what's the tree going to do in terms of biological health? Is it going to stress, enter into a spiral of decline, or is it going to go the other way? And I have a fairly high success rate in the trees pulling back on, particularly if I use that nasty chemical. Nasty chemical is, Andre?
Water.
Yeah, water.
Water.
Boy,
Yeah.
I feel guilty every time I do it.
Yeah. One thing, of course, always is that you can stipulate those conditions, Jeremy and everyone, that about you shall not cut these big roots or these size roots. But when the design is handed in and no one's done any exploratory, or no one's got X-ray vision, they come to do the works, the preparation, and it's time to dig. Oh, we come across a big root. Anyone looking? Or are we going to call to the arborist again?
Yeah, look, that's always going to be a problem with trees and development sites. And I have an answer, and the answer really applies to, again, Shane Lysard, who helped paid for the cost of production of the calculator, at least in the main. And that was, he got a better yield out of his property. And so there was interest in him doing that. And he was keen to go ahead and do the job successfully, because he got what he needed out of it. And I often say, most builders break the rules all the time anyhow. They're just notorious for it. So they're breaking the rules and they're getting away with it. What they've learned is the arborist understanding of trees isn't worth paying for, because they aren't tree experts, and they're getting it right more often than the arborist. The arborist said, keep 12 times trunk diameter away from the tree, but he cut 5 times trunk diameter away to put in the plumbing on the shortest route. And he now knows that the only reason he's paying for a report is for compliance, because otherwise arborists are just full of crap. And that's something we've got to deal with as a profession. And it's a real issue when builders, like the people that built the new wharf stuff at the Corso at Manly, those builders know that 2 times trunk diameter didn't kill the tree. They know that,
there's a time lag. There's a time lag, of course, always, and the after effects and the slowing down and everything else that might come in after. Yeah.
That's 1988. When should I expect that? That's 12 plus 25, 37 years ago. When the Buckland Yew was moved, that was 1,200 years old when it was moved. It was moved with a little over 2 times trunk diameter total size square. So it was about 5 meters by 5 meters, and the tree was about 2 meters by 2 meter trunk diameter. That was 1880. When will that one have problems? I mean,
That's that
one of the
nasty chemical again, water. Yeah.
yeah. And look, one of the things we've got to be clear on is we've got to stop this. It takes time. It does take time for damage to occur, or can do, if the tree starts to stagnate, go into a spiral of decline and go backwards. And we accept that. But there's also the opportunity all that time that the tree is going backwards for the tree to actually improve and go forwards. And so, 3 or 5 years later, our tree might be in better condition. And I can demonstrate that, Andre, and that is a fair comment. And again, I'll take a tanning from Samantha Ning, who's in the background there somewhere, saying, yes, but it's a fig. I can show the same thing with eucalypts. I'll show you 2 examples that I think demonstrate the point well. The first one is a fig tree. It's at Susan Street in Auburn. The city decided that it wanted to put a multi-story car park in. There's a heritage tree there. Can you see that?
Mm.
Yep. Okay, good. And there's a Lophostomy convertus in the foreground. So both trees are fairly sparse in canopy. 2008. Why are you not doing that? There it is. Some fairly large branches needed to be removed from the tree. You can see how sparse the crown is. A fair portion, because we're taking essentially 1/2 almost of the canopy out. It's about 1 times trunk diameter from the building. So you can just see the edge of the buttress here. You'll see a better shot of the size. So things aren't done as nice as you'd like. The trees are recovering a bit. Garbage had to be removed afterwards, constantly asked for it, didn't happen. Again, you get an idea of the size of the trunk. We're less than 2 times trunk diameter from the wall of the building. And so here we are 2 years later. Andre, is the tree looking better or worse?
She's got a good lot of regrowth.
Yeah, it looks like it's doing well. How about in 2015? That's 7 years later. So it's all very well to say, look, this tree may go backwards now, but the general indication is not that it's in a spiral of decline, but it's in a state of stability or improvement. And so in 20 years' time, this tree gets hit by lightning or something happens, then we say, oh, yeah, that was the root system. And that's the correlation causation issue. We've got to be really careful of it. And the reason that worked, you can see how dense the canopy is, or crown is, that's what it was beforehand. We use just 1 chemical. That's it. That's it there.
And mulch.
Yeah, that mulch. And you can see it's in a mulch bed. We encourage the cleaner to blow the leaves back onto the garden bed. So it's not perfect, but it is an improvement. So, I hear this, it takes years for damage to show itself, and sometimes it can. But if the tree is generally staying constant or improving in health, if it's flushing and growing, and you can see the Lophostome's thickened up heaps as well, just all because of water. So that's one. And the other one that I think is worthwhile looking at, and I'll just get to it fairly quickly if I can, not the bad ones, but better ones. Yep, here it is. Is this one, Andre? This is a Tilia cordata. The client called me, lovely guy, said, look, Sydney Water wants to get in and use their manhole, so the tree has to be removed. Is there anything I can do to keep the tree? And I said, let's be creative. Let's reduce it. So that's the tree beforehand. That's after the reduction. I wouldn't do the reduction now. If I had an opportunity again, I would change that part of the process. So the guys cut back in behind. They're not my employees. The contract crew came in to do it. They had to expose the opening to the manhole so that they could get in and access it. The tree, of course, has since died back and decayed. It's got a Ganoderma fruiting body in it, but you can see there's the opening, the manhole there, and the tree is still here and still with us. So I look at that and I say that's probably not an ideal situation. It's not, what I would call the best of the best, but it's better than getting rid of the tree. And so any option that allows you to keep the tree, in my mind, is a good option. Yep.
With that fig mark, I mean, one of the important things I think is just to stress that fact that it does have ongoing water to help mitigate the damage done. I think that the statement that things decline further down the track often can be true, where you do damage to trees and then they don't do anything about it, or they don't try and mitigate that damage through some remedial works.
Absolutely, Jeremy. And I think that's exactly the point, is that, as arborists, that's one of the things we should be doing. And under the standard now, that's what we need to demonstrate for a major encroachment, that you're actually going to do something to address the damage that's being done. So minor encroachment, simply an offset. Don't even need to do anything else. Moderate encroachment, you need to think about it, look at it, and perhaps do some bits and pieces. And a major encroachment, you need to start looking at stuff in more detail. You may need to do a root investigation, and you certainly need to look at, an irrigation system. And an irrigation system that's in place and functioning for 2 or 3 years will often be sufficient enough to get the tree past that point. So, 3 sets of battery changes is not an impossibility on a simple battery-operated irrigation system. And nowadays, I have to say, I don't know how many of you are coming across these new eSIM and these new broad area artificial SIMs that are coming into technology. So you can have your irrigation controller send you a text message when things go wrong. You can have all sorts of stuff come out there. It's just brilliant. So I don't see any reason why a simple bit of irrigation, it should be a problem. And again, if you're only cutting off, what have we got here in the calculator? You're only cutting off 8.6%. That's not a huge amount of impact. So something like that will recover a lot quicker than if you're doing, and we do, 35 and 40% impact. In those situations, that will take longer for the tree to recover. So the more damage you do, the longer you need to provide care. Just the same as with a person. Okay. So hopefully that helps make clear about the root calculator. The calculator's there. It's yours to use. Go hell for leather. It's a pretty fun thing to play with. If you need to do more than 20 roots, and I can't remember who it was, but someone called me and said, I've got a tree with more than 20 roots. You can just add the figures, guys. I'm not going to make it with 30 rows or 40 rows. But in most cases, you'll just start cutting out the smaller stuff. Occasionally, you're going to end up having to add in. Any other questions on that one? Hopefully, we've covered that in enough details, Peter. And you've all got the QR code to go and grab the paper and the access to the calculator. I don't know whether you can download the calculator or not. You can certainly work with it online. I know that.
You think you should be able to download it?
I don't know.
Sure we did.
My technology nerd controls everything that I do like that, and she shall not be argued with. So I know it's definitely locked to editing, because we didn't want 400 versions of it to go out there. But if you can download it, use it to your heart's content. It's just to play with. It's just fun to see the other side of things. Okay, any other questions from the floor?
I've got some questions which is kind of on the same subject, if that's all right.
Tip them quick. And anyone else got a question, just please press the raise your hand so we can drop Neil's out. It's not that we don't like him, we just don't want him to be the only person asking questions. If you've got them, just raise a hand and we'll come to you.
I should have sent them in, but I didn't have time, unfortunately. But yeah, I've got this project. There's 120 trees. It's a bush campsite, and they want to put an access road through and caravan park sites and stuff like that. And they've just done an aerial view, designed around it, and then they've got me in now to do an arboriculture impact assessment. And it's pretty bad. Like the original survey, there's about 50 trees missing. There's a lot of trees to be removed because they're right smack bang in the middle of the road, either the road or the campsites. I'm trying to get him to change them a little bit because there's a few really good trees that are right in the middle of some of the campsites. But yeah, I was sort of the same thing with the impact. I have recommended to remove the trees that are kind of right in the road. They're going to cut 300 mil in, and there's going to be a tree there. I've said remove the ones that are in direct, impact zone, but I haven't recommended any removal or, calculated any impact on any of the trees that are outside of that cut line that they're going to cut in. I find it's really overwhelming because there's about 120 trees. I can't calculate the impact on all of them. Like there's a major incursion into, as I said, on all like 40 trees per week.
So how would you handle it? First thing is, I'm hate job like that for the same reason as you do, and I say to them, go out and survey it for me. I want pegs in. There's no way I'm going to try and estimate that. I'm not a surveyor. Some pegs in for me, and then I can start looking at the job objectively. On a site like that, I have to say, and this is a horrible thing for me to say, I would the relevant trees. Because I just don't think there's any other way you can do that realistically. So trees in the middle of the road, you might tag a different color. And then I'd be asking them to start looking at design alternatives that are for retention trees that you value as a high. And then the consent for Victoria, they're going to come back and, I would even be considering looking at meeting with the consent authority before asking the client to meet with the consent authority before you even look at.
I don't know if it even is a consent authority because it's for parks.
Okay, so it's consent authority in Victoria.
So I don't know who the consent authority is. It's their land, or I suppose it's public land, but it's managed by Parks Victoria. So
okay, so in New South Wales National Parks, which is New South Wales Parks Authority, is powered by state legislation. Our Environmental Protection of Environmental Planning and Assessment Act says that this act binds the Crown. So the Crown needs to follow. Jeremy, it's the same in
Queensland. Yep.
So I'm almost positive. I know I did. Sorry, I only did one class or one cohort in Victoria, and so my head on, but I'm pretty sure you've got a similar condition, and so it'd be worth your while sitting down and finding the legislation. Horrible reading, you'll hate it, but it's the effort you need to go through once. Print off a copy, mark it up, and it's a big piece of legislation. Be thankful because I still have my old original Act folders, and I used to have to pay for them all. Nowadays, it's free. So you just print them off and mark them up, or do it digitally and mark them up digitally in a digital environment. But you do need what's in them, and this is part of the learning curve. The unit interpret legislation, ideally would have at least addressed that in part during your training. It doesn't always, depends on the delivery of what they see they want to contextualize.
I find that the national parks, I don't know about New South Wales or whatever, but I find that they kind of do what they want anyway.
Yeah, look, I think that's pretty well true of government departments. Having said that, so I deal with it, for example, with schools on a regular basis, as you know. They have an exemption under what's called a state environmental planning policy, and that gives them fairly limited exemptions. And I have to regularly write in my reports, you need to apply to the council for this one. And, I've got a one-page explanation as to why they have to do it. So again, if the access that the Crown is bound, then it may have to go through a process that is justifying that process to itself. So it may be its own consent authority under your act. It may not be, but any which way, they should value trees. That's why they're not the National Concrete Association. That's why they're National Parks.
Yeah.
Andre.
Very quickly on that, sometimes when the turnstiles of those departments go quick and get new staff in or acting people, sometimes they don't know what they're doing either, and they don't know their own act. The other day in our ACT, the department dumped the Pest, Plant and Animals Act and put it all in Biodiversity Act, and they slotted every minor and every major pest plant in 2 columns, tick them all off, and suddenly we have to notify every privet, every Pinus radiata. It's a balls up. They didn't know what they were doing, and they have to redo it.
Yes, look, law is often like that. For us, the classic example in New South Wales is our SEPs, state environmental planning policies, and sometimes I'll have had 30 and 40 revisions, and we still have it currently with our complying development SEP. Must protect the trees in accordance with the Australian standard. Well, the standard's not a set of specifications, misuse document, and so again, it's often just because people aren't talking to people, Andre. That's not just
Exactly.
bad behaviour. It's often ignorance about what is done and how it's done. But yes, look, I talk to the client, Niels, always, and say, look, I am concerned. I would like this done. I think we could probably keep a few trees that are important. How do you feel about that? Or is this just about design finished? A good client will respond with saying, well, look, we can do things. I can recall before the car SEP came in, a school locally to me said, look, we're going to knock down all these trees and put up a shade structure. And I went in and said, yep, okay, this is what you're going to knock down. And these are all a critically endangered association, and you're going to knock down shade trees to put up a shade structure. Think about an alternate location and whether you can't do that. And of course they could, and they did at the Main. So it's possible to encourage people to do the right thing. I'm not saying you're always going to get there, but I often quote a guy, Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger's a guy. His business partner is a guy called Warren Buffett. Charlie's worth a few $100 million or a few $1 billion. And when Charlie does a development, he says, I put in the biggest trees I can get. Well, I can do one better than putting in the biggest tree. A well-planned development, I keep some of the existing really big trees that he'd never be able to replace to give a sense of age and space. It's not an impossibility. There are times when that can't be done, but there are many times it can be done with just a lot of forethought and creativity. I mean, I think that's the other thing we often lack, trying to do things differently. But look, planning is almost an oxymoronical term in itself. It's
Yeah, there's no planning going on.
well, that's right. It's not that there isn't, but it's often very incomplete and it's often fundamentally flawed. I often walk away from things shaking my head, but I'm not in control of that. Jeremy, do you find a similar sort of?
Yeah, very much so. But and going back to your situation there, we follow the same process on every job. Collect the trees, put them on a drawing, go back to them and say, here are your good trees. What can we do to work around them? And here's a couple of suggestions. If you've got 300 mil of cut that goes to go right next to a tree, can we put down a waffle grid and put 300 mil arrays over the top of it so we're not cutting it? You've still got an impact, but you've got a less of an impact than you do if you're cutting it.
Yeah.
We use
And sometimes it
concrete on road.
works. Some those sorts of things, to minimise those impacts. And we've had people move roads. I've had people move a whole multi-story car park 10 meters. That was probably one of the better ones. But yeah, it's if you get them on a drawing and you can show them where they are and mark up, these areas to go around, you're able to talk across professions.
Yeah.
And certainly,
I was very excited when she said they're going to cut 300 deep. Thought that's quite a bit.
uncommon in
could be worse,
constructing
maybe.
a road because you want to get a whole pile of road base down and compact it and try and make it as water resistant as possible.
Yeah.
And again, just by making cuts in a road, you can often, steer away from the more important. It's a decision making that ideally they need to be a part of. They need to sit down with you, as Jeremy says, and say, okay, we see the issues. How about we try this, or how about we do that? And
They've gone about it a long way to start with. I think they just they've got the design already, and they've got some shit surveyor out there and missed 50 trees, and then now they want an impact assessment. I said I haven't done a preliminary assessment or anything, so they haven't designed around the good trees. They've already done the design, and now I'm deciding which trees are good. It's kind of backwards.
yeah, so
That's
raise it
98%.
with them.
That's 98% of the jobs.
Yeah, raise it with them, and just be aware that ultimately you're not the decision maker. You're the information provider, and you always have people do a great job, but frequently it's soul destroying, and then the last bit is okay, can we keep these trees 3 mils deep? The soil there might be 6 or 8 or 900 or a metre or 2 or 3 metres, and you may be able to say, look, we're going to keep some of these trees and monitor them, and you're going to look after them, and in 10 years' time, you may have some good trees left, and you may have some that in the time are going to go. So
I think what I was leaning to, because it was so overwhelming, I was just going to say, try to get one of the campsites moved a bit to retain some of the good trees, but then leave the main road in there, remove whatever's directly in the road, keep everything that's outside of the cut, and then just monitor and have an arborist on site when they're doing the actual cutting.
Yeah, look, if they're cutting to the trunk at 300, you may want to think about that, but at 2 or 3 meters, two times trunk diameter away, I would feel happy to at least look at that in more detail and see whether they can't be kept. And I'll push to the day I die. And sensors, I think we seriously underuse, and we need to be using more of. We need to say, look, can I retain? Not yes, if I'm cutting 5 times trunk diameter away, boy, that's close. And in fact, 5 times trunk diameter, 6 times trunk diameter, remember, if it's 6 times trunk diameter, it's a major encroachment just at that level. So it's the end of the minor encroachment. The standard, as long as you don't do work on the other side of the tree, at 6 times trunk diameter, I would rather do something, and you're in a bushland area, so it's fairly easy to do it. Maintain understory or maintain litter cover, organic material, and ideally whilst they're constructing, just an extra truckload of water going out into that adjacent area can have a big difference.
Yep.
Okay, that's good. Any other questions?
Thank you.
No, in the silence of it, Peter, when's the next get together? You knew I was going to ask you that.
Strength to you with that project, mate.
So did you just ask when our next one is?
Yes, Andre, what did you say?
Just wishing him strength on that job.
Yeah, yeah. It can be
Thank you.
frustrating,
Made it.
but if you're an arborist and you are not expecting to find disappointment and frustration and satisfaction on a fairly periodic basis, you're in the wrong profession. This is not like looking after babies and, you know, you get everyone in agreement. You can't just leave the child out there to die. This is an environment where at least a percentage of the players have a lovely phrase, and it's just a tree. The most destroying phrase that I can think of, but it's one that we have as a mantra of our whole policy society. You know, and we have to deal with that because it's just a tree is really important. It's not just a tree; it's an incredibly significant part of what we need in life. And those of you who haven't seen it, there's some wonderful work out of Australia on the health benefits of trees, and I'll keep on harping back to it. You know, our trees in less so for you where you are, Niels, but for us in the major cities, our trees are giving us more than $10 a square metre of life-saving health benefits per square metre of crown. That's enormous. What should be happening is the health department should be contributing to tree planting. We'd reduce medical costs, we'd reduce hospital expenses, we'd reduce mortality. And I love my city, but I live in a shitty little town with tree cover. You know, no wonder I'm obese and going insane.
We'll have to get to those chief medical officers and hammer onto them to get those figures into front of the politicians. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, it's getting there, and you know we've made some progress compared with, you know, I think I might have mentioned a while ago, I cleaned out our archives and I found my very first development site report, 2 pages long, and that was it. You know, fence the trees, add some water. You know, the key stuff was there, but it was just nothing like it is today. And we're fighting the same battles today, identical. Peter, our next ArborMentor?
9th of September, Tuesday the 9th.
Tuesday, the 9th of September. Get your questions in, get your images in. If you don't have them in, I'll pull out some of mine and we'll have chat about something. If you've got an area of interest that you want to have asked, get it to Peter and he'll make sure it gets scheduled in. Thank you all. Catch you next time.